Good afternoon. Wonderful to be back. It is the last day of January. January 31st, 2023. And we have you want to sit with me, Chassia?
Who we got here?
After many years of studying the Torah, sit on the chair. The 5 books of Moses.
Wow.
Our group over COVID decided to transition to start studying the rest of the books of the Bible. And I should point out, and we're currently studying the book of Kings, chapters 7 and 8. And it's the story of King Solomon and his temple. We already covered the story of Solomon's wisdom and his business dealings with the king of Tyre, who provides all of the wood for the temple. And I have with me a co-presenter, Chassia.
Yeah.
Don't ask her why she's not in school, but here she is. You're scratching me. You want to stop that?
No.
So we are studying the book of Kings, and we're particularly at the point where King Solomon's reign is secure. He started out with a little bit of competition in the lifetime of King David. There needed to be an intervention to make sure that Solomon would be the one that ultimately is chosen to be the king. And but eventually he's given an opportunity. No, it's not. Eventually he's given the opportunity. Eventually he's given the opportunity to ask of Hashem for anything that he'd like, essentially, and he asks for wisdom. And famously, God is pleased with his desire for wisdom, to be a fair leader. And ultimately, King Solomon picks up on King David's dream, which is to build a temple for the Almighty, for God. And it is a massive project, which we read in chapters 5 and 6, the intricate details of the design. And then in chapter 7, we read about King Solomon's palace. In addition to the temple, he also builds a palace. Now, those who have traveled to Jerusalem, know that there's a very, very popular, mind-blowing archaeological site called Ir David, the city of David. And that is the earliest part of the city of Jerusalem, where King David and King Solomon had their reign. And then at some point, the point that we're reading about now, King Solomon expands to build a temple. And so that's what we're reading about. We read, it's been a few weeks, we read all about King Solomon's temple, which was magnificent, though smaller than the common presentation of the temple of the second temple. Because as we know, just to give one more line of introduction, and then we will share the screen, the Jewish people first construct what we call the Mishkan, or the tabernacle. And that we read about in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, how they build a tabernacle while Mishkan, while they are wandering in the desert. Then, upon arriving to Israel, after many years of maintaining a temporary sanctuary, a temporary temple, we at long last, in this story, have King Solomon building a permanent temple. That temple will stand until the conquest of Israel by the Babylonians, by King Nebuchadnezzar, which we will read about in the coming
and what year is this, Rabbi?
Months and years.
What year is this?
You know what? I don't have the precise.
You don't have to have the exact year.
We're talking approximately.
Yeah.
Here, give me 1 second. I'll try to give you more precise numbers. Hang on.
Let's
get a calculator.
Doesn't have to be exact.
Yeah.
Just so I get a, feeling for it.
We're talking about approximately 600 BCE.
Okay.
500 BCE.
Okay.
Or maybe even a little bit earlier, maybe 8, 7, again, I don't have the exact numbers.
Right. Okay.
We're talking about when the numbers used to go down instead of going up.
Right.
Before the commoner. And then that temple stands for approximately 400 years. It's destroyed. Then there's a number of years of a down period, and then the temple is reconstructed with the permission of the Persians, and that's the second temple. The second temple gets a vast makeover by King Herod towards the end of the second temple era in ballpark year one. Ballpark a little bit before that, but in approximately that period of time, in the final 100 years or less of the temple. So today we're reading about King Solomon's temple. Before we go on and read about King Solomon's prayer for this new temple, and before we see Solomon's wishes and the celebrations of the temple, I thought we'd do something a little bit atypical. So I'm going to share the screen, and we are going to take a peek at some presentations that I found online. Now, here's the problem. The internet is full of stuff. But as a Jew, you want to be very careful to make sure the stuff you're accessing is not missionary efforts to get Jews on websites that are run by Christians. And it could be our friends, but as a rabbi, I'm certainly not going to advise partaking of those information. And so you got to be careful. So here is a short video presentation. In their disclaimer, they say that they are not claiming to be precise, and I can tell you it's certainly not precise, but it gives us a wonderful flavor of what we read about 3 weeks or 2 weeks ago, and then we'll go on to read what King Solomon did. So I'm going to share the screen, and again, with all the disclaimers. It's not precise, but it's the best we can find on the internet for now. And so what you're seeing now here is the courtyard of a temple, and then in the center of the courtyard, what we call Solomon's temple. Just, if you'll bear with me for a minute, it's only a short video. We'll just get a little sense of what it may have looked like. So here we're outside of the temple, and the animation is gonna take us. You see the screen, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they're showing here, this is the courtyard. Well, again, this is an older animation software that they made a video out of, but essentially they're trying to show you how there was an altar in the courtyard of the temple.
I have a question about this with the cows underneath. What does that represent? In other words, it's to the right of that. We just saw it fleetingly.
Yes, let's take a look, and then we'll go back briefly.
Okay.
These are a number of items that are described in passing.
Yeah. It's like sitting on a bunch of cows or something.
Yes. Here, well, let's watch the video, and then I will.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Let's go. Okay. Yeah, that's what you're referring to, right? We'll talk about that in a second. This is a portrayal of the inside of the temple structure.
Okay.
This is called the altar, the incense altar, or the golden altar. And I believe now they're going to try to give us a portrayal of going into the Holy of Holies. This is meant to be a priest. Again, they're using software that's not optimized for creating designs of the temple, but they did a pretty good job nonetheless.
But how do they know what it looked like if it was destroyed?
They know it from the texts of the Bible, chapter 6, which describes in rough detail the temple. We read it through pretty fast. Lynn, I think you might have not been there that week.
Oh, maybe. Okay.
And that's why I wanted to give, at least we'll get some kind of visual plug in.
Where do we see this?
This is the curtain that existed between the Holy of Holies. This is a portrayal of the Ark, cherubs. And inside are the tablets, the 10
Yeah.
Commandments.
Amazing.
So is that all they had with the tablets?
According to this portrayal, yes.
So
They
didn't
also
have
had
the
it. They also
scrolls?
had in it the Torah, the
Really?
Torah
See,
of Moses
had-
and the manna. And what this is showing now is they had different side. Hold on, let me tell you. This is I believe what they're describing as Solomon's stables. I believe that's what they're trying to portray over here. Again, today they could probably produce something a little better, but there you have
That's
it. An
pretty good.
interesting
If you've
structure.
got a flat roof like this one right here,
Oh.
and you
Oh. All right. Actually, Lynn, I realized I made a mistake. We did not yet read. We read about the structure, but we're going to read today about that item, which is described in the Bible as the Yam Shel Shlomo, a special water thing that was used for the priests to prepare to go into the temple.
Right, but did they have like drawings of this or?
Not in the
anything like
temple.
that?
These
Not of the temple,
drawings.
okay.
These drawings are portrayals of that which is described in the
Mhm.
Bible, and
Okay.
it's based on different commentaries. But actually, here, I'm going to do just bear with me another second. This is another piece of this is another how do you call it, projection of the temple. You'll notice it looks different, which when you can see how vastly different a portrayal can be, it makes you realize that we don't know exactly what it looked like. But give me a second over here. This I don't believe was made by Jewish animators. But here, it's just a different vantage point. But if you look, here is the building around of the broader structure. This is that same arc, very grainy. That's going to be that image that you asked about that we're going to read about today. These are
Right.
other wagons or trolleys, and this is meant to be that structure. Again, portraying it as a much taller and hollow. Actually, I don't know why it's so grainy. Again, very grainy, but similar. And again, we'll stop here, but you get the picture.
Mhm.
Now let's take a look at some text and try to plug it in. You'll see why when we read the text, you'll understand, I think, why I really wanted to use some audio visual, because it's hard to sometimes go from an abstract, obscure verse and to put together a building. So I just want to back up a few lines. We're talking about how, here we go. So now we'll start. Book of Kings, chapter 6. We've finished discussing the general structure of the temple, a temple mountain with a broader complex, with an inner structure within it, which was actually of two parts, the Holy and the Holy of Holies. And now we're just going to close out that narrative. I think we ended off over here, chapter 6. The double doors were made of olive wood. So the temple had doors, which we actually saw portrayed in those, how do you call it? In those animations as well. Were made of olive wood, and on them were carved reliefs of cherubs, palms, and calyxes, which if anyone here want to tell us what that is?
I don't know.
Other designs, overlay them with gold, hammering the gold onto the cherubim and to the palms. So it's very ornate, decorated, doors.
Where did they get all the gold for this, for the temple?
You
Where
know
did the
why?
gold
Because
come from?
he seized it, or he taxed the people, and the people
Wow.
of Israel, not to go too far off on a tangent, but if you recall, the Jewish people asked for a king a book or two ago,
Right.
and God's unhappy, and Samuel's unhappy, and he says, "Hey guys, you know what it means to have a king? You've got no freedom, you have no private rights or no private possessions. Everything ultimately can be seized by the king." And so we find that Solomon did tax the people heavily. We read in chapter 5
Mhm.
how he seized workmen and laborers. So,
But wasn't he a wealthy king anyway?
well, he
Didn't
became
he inherit
wealthy.
money
Became
from
wealthier.
David? Didn't he
No, a lot
inherit?
of the king's wealth is because the people enriched the king by paying taxes.
So,
Well,
but didn't he inherit money from his father?
He did, but where did his father get money from? The same way.
Okay.
And also, his father was nowhere near as well-to-do and nowhere near as affluent in administration as King Solomon.
Mhm.
Well, so let's read. So he has now the doors, the entrance of the great hall. He made doorposts of another type of wood, atzei shaman, and these are some funky translations here, but oil wood doorposts for the fourth entrance, and 2 double doors of cypress wood, each containing 2 rounded planks, 2
Mhm.
rounded boards, which were also decorated with cherubs and palms and other kinds of flowers, overlaid with gold, applied evenly over the carvings. He, Solomon, built an inner enclosure of 3 lines of hewn stone and 1 line of cedar beams. So he built a courtyard, which we saw in our video, an inner courtyard surrounding the structure. It's made of stone, rows of stone and rows of wood. And at long last, in the 4th year of his reign, in the month of Ziv, which is one of the commentaries. Now I'm drawing a blank, so I'm going to actually have to pass on for a moment. The month of Ziv, he at long last finishes the construction, and this is in the 11th year, so it's finished in the 4th year, and in the 11th year, back up, in the 4th year of his reign, in the month of Ziv, the foundation of the house was laid. And only 7 years later, in the 11th year, in the month of Bul, which is the 8th month of the year, which is Cheshvan, the house was completed according to all its details, all its specifications. It took Solomon 7 whole years to build the temple.
Mhm.
So, how did he build it? The people's money, and it took a long time. Today, Dezer could build. Gil Dezer could probably build a building much faster, but here we're talking about an ornate,
very elaborate,
highly specified building at a time where they had nowhere near the technology. Everything was done by hand in a beautiful, wonderful structure for Hashem. And it's at long last the month of Cheshvan that the temple is finally built.
You know what I'm wondering, Rabbi?
I'm sorry?
Now there's time to build synagogues and differently, not as elaborate. Membership has changed, and the importance of having people come there so we can support the temple. But why is it that you think God appreciates making such an elaborate temple and taking this away from people who need it, maybe even for food. I don't quite understand that. How in
You're
this
saying that
pattern-
you would rather see resources. You're trying to understand why God would value a structure instead of
Right.
feeding. Well, I think we need to do both.
So
This
Rabbi,
is
I have
not.
a
This
question.
doesn't take the place of providing for the needy, but
Uh,
people need a place and a way to express their connection. They need to have a place that's going to inspire
Well-
their imagination and inspire their sense of spirituality. And
Of
we could
course,
build Disney
but
World, and we could
I
build.
think he took advantage of the people, taking a little bit too much. The pattern continues now, that people, it seems like man from the very beginning has a quality of being too greedy, I think. Keeping everything for themselves. Of course, the temple's important, but why to be so elaborate? Do you think people wouldn't come? I don't feel that way.
No, because we honor.
Taking all the
Lynn, what do you? I'm sorry, Lynn. You wanted to say
My
something?
question is,
Hmm?
so were the Torah scrolls then written much later than this? Because you're telling me all they had were the tablets.
No. Actually, the Torah that Moses received was also inside the ark, as well as the manna. There was a jar of
So they
manna.
already had the Torah
Yes, they had the
and
Torah. They had the tablets, and they
the
even had the
tablets
broken.
and the Torah. They had both.
Yes, and they had the broken tablets. The Torah
Okay.
was finalized 40 years after the tablets were broken, during or just before the passing of Moses. Here we are talking
So
about.
we had the Torah scrolls already.
Yes.
Okay.
Here we're talking about approximately 2600 years ago. After the Torah, the Jewish people have the Torah for 400 or so years, and now they're building.
And they were written. Those Torah scrolls were
Yes.
written. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
All right, now let's see about Solomon's home. It took Solomon 13 years to build his palace until his whole palace was completed. So he built something for God, for the people, but he also built something that was a palace for his administration. He built a Lebanon forest house, Beit Yar Halvanon, with 4 rows of cedar columns, with hewn cedar beams above the columns. Its length 100 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Today, this might not even be considered so elaborate, but in those times, it was quite a hefty structure with beams running across. And I think we said a cubit was approximately 1.5 feet. So we're talking about 150 feet wide by half that size of width, and quite a significant height. It was paneled
And
with cedar.
By this time, Solomon is married. He has children, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're going to read some more about Solomon's private life once we get through
Yeah,
this
I
watch.
want to know about his private life.
There's some famous events that we're going to discuss, not today, but in the coming weeks. It was paneled above with cedar, with planks that were above on the 45 columns, 15 in each row. So we're talking about a lot of material, a beautiful structure with a roof, which I guess today, you don't have a structure without a roof. But I guess in those days, it was hard to fathom such a large building also had a roof. There were 3 rows of window frames with 3 tiers of windows facing each other. All the doorways, doorposts had square frames with 3 tiers of windows facing each other. So we get a sense of what Solomon's palace, what his home, if you want to call it, or the house of it is administration must have looked like. Furthermore,
pretty elaborate.
he made I'm sorry?
It's pretty elaborate. Solomon also built the Solomon Pillars in a lot, which
Yes.
I was there
Yes.
and climbed.
And then you
It
have
was very elaborate.
Yes. And then they have what's described as Solomon's stable, which may or may not have been built by Solomon, but also on the Temple Mount. And that was an area where the Crusaders, I think, had their military encampment in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount for a while. Anyways,
Rabbi, I have another question.
yes.
I'm sorry. So in that period of time, things were very peaceful, which you mentioned once before.
It
So
was the
there was
most
nobody
peaceful-
opposing the
Yes.
building of this temple, correct?
Yes, it was the most peaceful period
Right.
of the Jewish people.
Okay, thank you.
He also made an entrance hall, a portico with columns 50 cubits long, 30 wide. So not only did he have a big building, but he even had a large courtyard, and the portico is in front with columns, and there were columns, the canopy in front of them. He made a throne portico. He made a separate area for his throne where he was to pronounce judgment. So he had in his administration complex, in his, not city hall, but in his governmental structure, he had a courtyard, he had a large indoor structure, he had a special area for judgment, we might call the courthouse, which was paneled with cedar from floor to floor.
He wasn't doing so bad, was he?
Did he have a hot tub? Okay, sorry about this.
The house that he used as a residence. So now we're gonna understand. He didn't live in that whole building. This was the whole governmental building
Compound.
compound.
Yeah, the
The house that
compound.
he used as a resident, the place that he actually lived in the rear courtyard, back of the portico, was of the same construction. But he did live in the same quality as the general palace. Solomon also constructed a palace like that portico. Are you ready? For the daughter of Pharaoh, whom he married. So we're going to read more about how he marries. Actually, I think we read about it. He marries the daughter of Pharaoh for as a political alliance. We discussed this, didn't we?
Right, and what was her name again?
We didn't get her name.
And Rabbi, was his home right near the temple?
This was pretty close by.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could everybody go to the temple?
I can't remember her name now, the Pharaoh's daughter.
We didn't give a name.
Okay.
She's described as
Rabbi?
the princess.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, could everyone go to the temple? Everybody.
All Jews were able to go to parts of the temple, but there were certain parts that were not accessible to everyone.
Okay, I have a question. Did the
Yes.
Pharaoh's wife
She converted.
she convert?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Now I can sleep peacefully.
Yes. All the buildings from foundation, all the buildings were built up from the foundation to the ceiling, all the way out to the great courtyard, were of high grade stones, hewn according to measure, custom hewn, smooth on all sides, which is different, by the way, than I think a lot of the stone that we see in Israel today.
Oh, hell, a lot of marble there.
Why would Solomon, by the way, single out the daughter of Pharaoh? He had apparently a few wives. Well, she was the most politically significant because, as we know, the big macher in the region was Egypt. And so Solomon needs to keep the Egyptians happy. And that's a lot of what's going on over there. Foundation was huge blocks of high-grade stone, stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits, which, by the way, well, we if you go to Israel, you go to Jerusalem, you'll see large stones. I don't know if it's these stones. I think it's from a later period, but massive stones. And above so there was large foundation stones, above which were choice stones, meaning there was a structural component, and then there was the decorative presentation.
Okay, and Rabbi, the Egyptians did not disapprove of this marriage. They were happy
They
about
were
it.
down for it too. That's how ancient people in times past made alliances.
Okay.
And they had someone they trusted in the court, and Solomon, it's hard to imagine such a dynamic today where children are used essentially not viewed as simply children, but some kind of political pawn. It's tragic to think that that's how it was, but that is certainly how it was.
How is it accepted? Like now, somebody who converts. If you're in Israel and you convert, are you considered an equal as somebody who is born Jewish?
Yeah.
Their mother was Jewish.
Whatever the standard was then. I don't want to go into it right now. That's a little bit, but whatever the standard for conversion then was, that was deployed. Again, there's a lot to discuss on it. I want to stay focused. I'm trying to get past the structural description I want to get some juicy story. Right
Wanna
now we're
get to the
getting,
good
you know,
part.
but we got to get
I-
through this. The large
I like
surrounding
to think about
courtyard
your
had
main-
rows of
your main
stone
part.
and wood, similar in design to the house of the Lord, the temple, and the portico around the house. King Solomon sent for Hiram, brought him down from Tyre. So King Solomon hired a special designer, someone who was highly skilled at construction. Now, the interesting thing, the intrigue over here is that although this man was not the king of Tyre, he shared his name. So the king of Tyre was called Hiram, but there was also a famous craftsman with the same name. Maybe it was a name of the elites, and so that's why it appears by the king and others. Who was this guy? Was he Jewish or not? Well, he was the son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, Jewish mom from Naphtali, and his father had been a Tyrian, a coppersmith. So his father was from Tyre. Now we discussed a while back that the people of Tyre were were expert at design. And so it's possible either that his father was actually not Jewish or not born Jewish, let's say, or that he's called that to express his expertise in design. He was endowed with skill, ability, talent for executing all work in bronze. He came to King Solomon and executed all his work. So he was a very, very talented person. And he was especially skilled with bronze, which must have been an important metal in those days. And so we're going to see he did a lot of very special bronze decorative installations for the temple. He cast 2 columns of bronze. One column was 18 cubits high. So what's 18? Talking about a 27-foot tall column, which was 17 cubits in circumference. He made 2 columns of that size. Oh, yeah, he made 2 columns like that. He made 2 columns cast in bronze to be set upon the 2 columns. The height of each of these 2 columns being 5 cubits. So we're talking about a very elaborate, exhaustive decoration. And we're going to see some other stuff. He also made screens of meshwork or nets of meshwork with threads of chainwork for the capitals. What are capitals in architecture and in especially in the temple era?
I don't know.
So the capitals are those decorative. I think we associate them more with Roman and Greek architecture and design. But I think it's the pillars that have on the top a decorative design element.
Right.
And so that the capitals were designed also with the metal chainwork, 7 for each of the 2 capitals. And so they had a number of nets or designs, creating further elaborate design on these posts, on these columns. He made the columns so that they were 2 rows of pomegranates encircling the top of one network. What do we mean by pomegranate? I don't think we mean literally pomegranate. We mean a certain design to cover the capitals, the top of the pomegranates. He did the same on the second capital. So we're talking about very, very elaborately, ornately designed with mesh, metal, and fruit-like designs. The capitals upon the columns of the portico were of a lily design,
My God,
4 cubits high.
they're very specific here about the
Yes.
design.
Of course.
Let's try something over here. We're going to
If
search Google.
Solomon wasn't the king, the previous king, how would the temple be designed, you think? If it wasn't, Solomon had the money, he had a very elaborate designs. How would it have been if he wasn't the one who would design?
If he was or he wasn't?
He wasn't.
He had a good designer, right?
Yeah.
Right, but he got all this money. Suppose somebody else was the king, and would you think the temple would be different? Not as elaborate, but beautiful, and like.
I don't know.
Don't know that because this is what happened. We don't know.
Yeah. You don't.
we're reading-
I wonder.
There's Sheila. There's a Jewish saying. There's a saying in Yiddish.
Yeah.
Mifrek nish lakasha afa maisa. We don't ask a question on a story. So the reality is that we're reading a narrative of an event that happened a long time ago,
Mhm,
where the
True.
Jewish people saw value in building a structure.
mhm.
So it's good to ask questions to understand why they made those decisions. But I think we have to try to put our moral discomfort aside just to understand that
Right.
I'm just wondering about his character. I always believe
the
even
story
now
is
that somehow
the
It is
story
what it
is
is.
as it was.
it
That's
was.
right. It is what
It's
it
still
is.
the same way though. Things haven't changed.
Hold on, let me show you. Oh, I think we
Yes.
just hit the jackpot here.
Right.
Yeah, let me see.
I've been searching for this for a long
Oh,
time.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
Here is it's another website, but I didn't realize they had this. It's only in Hebrew, but take a look at this. These are see, this is cedar trees of Lebanon. So if you're
Yeah.
wondering what the wood was like, this is the wood. Now here is the temple,
yeah.
and we spoke about a lot of stuff, but right now we're describing
Where's
these
the
Posts.
temple?
Yeah,
two
yeah,
pillars,
yeah, yeah.
which are capped with a capital, with a
Mhm.
decorative
Mm,
top piece, where there's ornate decoration.
right.
And so that's what we're trying to, that's approximately what we are describing over here. I'm going to keep this window open and we're going to refer to it more exhaustively.
Uh-huh.
Irma?
Can you imagine? Yeah, I just wanted to say, can you imagine based on the time period, how much time it took to
Oh,
build such a thing? I mean, think
Well-
about, we think about nowadays building and even something that's unusual or ornate or whatever. I mean, we have machinery and stuff to do it that they didn't have. So
mhm.
taking the time to describe it is it's apropos because of the time period that it was. It's
Right.
so much involved in
That's
doing.
right.
Yeah, that's why it's so descriptive.
Mhm.
Anyways,
Yes,
Amazing.
yes. Yes. It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
That is amazing to build such a structure.
And this
without
is also
the
this is a
modern-
good picture to
Amazing.
bookmark generally to
Yeah, what was in that thing with the cows, that dome? Was anything in there?
we're going to read about it in a moment. It was
Yeah.
water. It was a
Water?
fountain.
Oh,
It was a
water?
reservoir of water. And they
Oh.
would use that water for different parts of the ritual or for
Oh,
cleansing.
I see the little spout.
You see a little
going
fountain here
into-
filling it up?
I see a spout right there,
Yes.
and it's going into another, on wheels, it's going into something else.
Yes.
That's,
Yes.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
filling. See
We're going to
it?
read about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So, but again, you see, we read all of this. I could have never drawn a picture of this, but having this picture is
Right,
Right.
very helpful.
very helpful.
So on the capital, no, we read that already. So he set the columns at the portico at the Great Hall, which is again describing this outdoor area right in
Right.
front of the temple. He set up one column on the right, and it was called the Yachin. He set the other column on the left, and it was called Boaz. So there was actually there were names for these two columns. Now,
But do the names have meaning, or they're just names?
so they obviously had meaning. What is the meaning?
Uh-huh.
Why would they give them names? Well, Boaz may have been a great-great-grandfather of King Solomon.
It was this person, okay.
Yachin means robust and sturdy, and so maybe there was some kind of, or not maybe, there was certainly a symbolism of the choice
Right,
of names. But curious to hear more. Let's look at this. Oh, you see Yachin. Why was it called Yachin? It was a good sign that the house should always endure. It should be robust and eternal. So
Mhm.
I don't know if they had names, but it was really associated with a certain wish and
Okay.
hope for the new building.
right.
And I guess it was understood that this would be a good mazel to give optimistic, positive names
Right.
to
Mhm.
these ideas. Interestingly
Right.
enough, there is a work on the Mishnah, which again, we'll talk more about that if you'll join us for the Wednesday night course,
We will.
Booksmart. There is a commentary for the Mishnah called Yachin Uboaz, named
Oh.
after these two
Right.
Mhm.
these two structures.
You know, Rabbi, when I listened to the lecture, which was, I think it was last Monday, this Israeli that was telling about all the books that you're talking about in 6 weeks, he was doing in 1 hour. And perhaps to talk about so many things, It was too much.
All right. I hope you're
Yeah,
not going to
the
judge
rabbi
me.
will
I
make
hope
it
you're not
good.
going to judge me on his performance.
No,
That's right.
no. He said it was what I'm saying was that you're doing, perhaps you'll do the Mishnah one time, and then he did it all in about less than an hour without kind of questions. He said it was easy. It was not easy when you got so many of the different paths to it, the Kabbalah and the Mishnah and everything.
Yes.
It was most difficult. I know I believe you will do it in a way over a period of time that we can understand. But it was interesting because he said it was easy, and everyone said it wasn't just me. Everyone said no, it wasn't easy.
All right, let's
You were
Go
confused.
on.
I want to find out about that. The cows.
Okay, let's hear
On the
about
top
the
of the
cows.
column, there was a lily design. If anyone's seen Israeli currency, there's like a little. Oh, let's see.
There's a lily on it.
Let's see if I can get it on Google.
What would we do without Google, huh?
I know. Safari, Google.
We're so spoiled.
We are. We
Yeah.
are. Once upon a time, we'd have to run to the library,
You bet.
or
I know.
before
A
that, we
lily.
would have to
I
just
see a
open it.
lily.
So
There
Open
it
the
many
is.
encyclopedia.
Is that a lily?
That's right. That's a lily. Yep.
So this
Oh,
design,
clever.
which is on the 1 shekel coin,
You know your flowers.
yeah, Lynn, that's
Well,
apparently
it's
is.
not exactly a lily, but we'll let it be a lily.
We'll let it
be.
slide. By the way, why is this design on the shekel? Because this is
Oh, it says Lily though.
ancient design that was found in a number of places, and so that's why.
It's a lily bud. The center of it is a bud. It's not open.
Yes,
See?
It's so interesting way when you dig in Israel, you never know you could be dealing and you find coins. That's kind of interesting.
yes.
With
this
what's
is-
on these
This is
coins.
based on
Here's
archaeology. has
the lily.
uncovered-
Come here. Rabbi, right here is the lily.
Right. The right over here.
None, yeah, that's an open lily. And go up above. That's the lily opened up. Yes.
Yes.
That's what it looks like. That's what the
Beautiful.
lily looks like, opened up. But the bud is what they're showing on the coin. It's a bud unopened.
So here's what we need to do. One more thing on Google. Thank you, Google. Origin of lily design in.
Oy. All right.
Well, I want to get that archaeological
Mm-hmm.
portrayal.
Those are definitely lilies.
Anyways, the bottom line is in ancient Israeli or Judean design, this was a common motif, and we're reading about it over here. Then on top of the columns, there was a lily design. Thus, the work of the columns were complete. Again, that's the columns that we're describing right over here. Now we got to move on to something else. Then they made a tank of cast metal. 10 cubits across from brim to brim, completely round, 5 cubits high and 30 cubits in circumference.
Mm-hmm.
There were gourds below the brim, completely encircling it, 10 to a cubit, encircling the tank. The gourds were in 2 rows, cast in one piece with it. We're going to go back to the picture in a moment. And it stood upon 12 oxen.
Here we
This
are.
large tank or bath or water receptacle made of metal was held by 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, 3 east, with a tank resting upon it. Their hunches were all turned inwards. And so here we get a picture of that Yam Shel Shlomo, this
Mhm.
water receptacle of King Solomon, supported by oxen, each facing in different directions.
Great. Yeah. It's gorgeous.
Let's just look for that
Yeah.
verse here. Bear with me a moment.
And was that made of brass or gold? Is that gold?
It looks like it's made of brass,
Brass. Okay.
but I'm trying here. I'm new to this website, so I don't want to blow it. But I want to get that. Well, anyways,
So it was brass, right?
believe so. Yeah, we can look back. Cast metal.
Cast metal. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And there were the oxen, their haunches towards inwards, meaning their heads faced outwards. It was a handbreadth thick, and its brim was made like that of a cup, with a thicker rim like the petals of a lily. Capacity was 2,000 baths. What is a bath? What is the measurement of a bath or a bat in Hebrew? 24 liters times 2,000. That's a lot of water. To put it mildly.
Mm-hmm. Now, where did they get this water from? Is this water from rain? Where is this water coming from?
Let's see where the water is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
He made 10 laver stands of bronze. The length of each he made wagons to hold water made
Yeah.
of bronze.
Right.
The length of
we
each
saw-
stand were 4 cubits, the width 4 cubits, and the height 3 cubits.
Yeah.
And
We saw one wagon right here.
yeah, I mean, here they're rounded, but I believe that's what he's describing.
Right.
Structure of the stand was as follows. They had insets, and there were insets within the frames. So these little trolleys or carts were designed, and on the insets or on the panels within the frames were etchings of lions and oxen and cherubs. Above the frames was a stand, and both above and below the lion and the oxen were spirals of hammered metal. Each laver stand had 4 bronze wheels, 2 bronze axles, 4 legs had a bracket, and the brackets were on the laver with the spirals between each. And so that's what we're describing over here. These wheels
Mhm.
and these
Mhm.
faucets.
And there's a lot of them over there in the back. There's more of
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Did you see them?
So what do we write over here? He made 10.
Yeah, well, you could see 3 of them.
3 of them
Yeah,
are there, and there are others that are
yeah.
behind the altar.
Yeah, yeah.
Ornately designed.
So what? Okay,
Its
Now,
funnel, meaning where the water emerged.
right.
In the crown rose a cubit above it. It was a faucet. This funnel was round in the fashion of a stand, a cubit and a half in diameter. On the
Mhm.
funnel, too, there were carvings, but the insets were square, not round.
And where
So-
did they get the water from?
Let's see if it describes it here.
Mm-hmm.
And these 2 were ornately designed with brackets. Trying to get some information.
Because there was not a lot of water. There was not a lot of rain, right?
Correct?
So the water had to come from someplace.
Yeah. So basically, it sounds like you had these water dispensers that were on wagons or on trolleys. The way this picture describes it, it's almost, we imagine it as a single unit, but which it kind of looks like it is. But if you think about it conceptually, you have this water holder, which is on which is on a trolley or on a dolly. And that's why we're describing it almost as 2
But-
different
but the-
units. You
but
have the
that was
laver, which is the
filled. It was filled by the large round container.
yes. And in this very manner, he made 10 different stands for the lavers, all alike, the same
Mhm.
measure, the same form. Then he made 10 bronze lavers, 1 laver on each of the 10 laver
Right.
stands.
And
So
I guess
basically,
they
he
had
had
to carry
stands.
the water someplace.
Yes.
Right.
I think they had reservoirs, you look in Caesarea, they built reservoirs.
Well,
In
let's
some of the fortresses, even like in the north, or look in the Galan, I've been there where they had reservoirs. That was a very popular thing.
Yeah, but how would they get that water all the way into the big?
the
Rainfall.
And
I
then
I
what?
think it's from the rainfall. They built reservoirs up like a big deep hole, and they collected the rain.
Yeah, but they had to collect it in the big, whatever it's called, because then they were it was going into the little
Yeah.
parts with wheels. So
Yeah.
it was in the big one first, right?
Probably.
Yeah. So
Yes,
maybe
it
it was
was.
rain. I don't know how much rain there was there.
No, in the summertime, it never rains in the summertime.
It never rains in Southern California.
Never. Well, in Israel, it doesn't rain in the
Never
summertime.
rains in
Probably,
right?
probably in the winter.
Right. So we have to find out where the water came from.
Yeah.
The Jordan River.
The what?
The Jordan River.
I don't know.
I don't know if it came that far.
Let's
It's
see.
Probably
that-
not.
It seems like this big, huge thing
A lot of
was
water.
was a catch-all for water. I don't think they could bring water up inside of it. I don't know.
Look how they had a Masada. You know, they had water up there. They had, you know, places where they had water. How did they get the
Well,
water there? It's
I have
rainfall.
no idea.
Yep.
Rabbi will have to, find out for us.
We have to keep on reading. We have,
Okay.
So
They talk
Hiram
about the
designed
water.
these, and now Hiram finished all the work, all this expert work. What did he design in total? Let's read this real fast, even though we're going kind of late. 2 columns, 2 of the tops, the caps of the columns, the globes of the columns, 2 pieces of network or mesh to cover the globes, 400 pomegranates for 2 pieces of network and 2 rows of pomegranate. Again, ornate design for each network to cover the globes of the capital. We're talking about the ornate design of these 2 posts.
Mhm.
And then he also made the 10 stands with wheels
Right.
and the 10 lavers upon the stands.
Right.
1 tank with the 12 oxen underneath the tank. That's the
Right.
big one. Pills, scrapers, sprinkling bowls. All those vessels in the house of the Lord that Hiram made for King Solomon were made of burnished bronze.
Right.
King had them cast in earthen molds in the plains of Jordan between Sukkoth and Zarethan. So the work is not being done in Jerusalem, it's being done, and then it's going to be brought to Jerusalem.
Mm.
Solomon left all the vessels unweighed because there were so many. The weight of bronze was not even calculated. Solomon made all the furnishings that were in the house of the Lord, the altar of gold, the tables for the bread of display of gold. And now we're describing the next items in the temple. In the temple, and I think we're going to close out with this, there was something called the shulchan, or the table. And on that table,
Mm-hmm.
they would place bread, special lechem hapanim, show bread. And that's what's being described over here, over here.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the altar of gold. This is a golden small altar used for incense,
Mm-hmm.
and a table for the bread of display of gold, and minorot, which here he's translating as lamp stands or candelabras. And there were 5 on the right side and 5 of the left side in front of the temple. Solid gold, petals, lamps, tongues, and gold. So although we usually imagine a single menorah, a single tabernacle, in truth, what's being described over here or portrayed over here is many candelabras. How many in total? 10.
Mhm.
5 and 5.
Pretty elaborate. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And there's basins and snuffers and sprinkling bowls and ladles and fire pans and solid gold. And the hinge sockets for the door of the innermost part of the base of the temple, the Holy of Holies, for the door of the great hall, all of gold. So in addition to all the bronze, there's a lot of gold items, and all these items, the tables, the tabernacles.
Right.
Let's see what else we get designed over here. Here's another portrayal of the temple with bowls and other kinds of
Mhm.
stuff, all made of gold.
Wow.
Now here they provide, I think we're going to, okay, when all the work was done in the house of the Lord, Solomon brought in the sacred donation, that's what they translated, silly translation, all the stuff of King David, the silver, the gold, the vessels, and brought them into the temple of the Lord. So at long last, again, I thought we were going to get into chapter 8, but clearly not. So today we've discussed at length and looked at pictures describing the temple and many of the ornate designs and decorations that were part of the temple. And so here we're looking at the menorah, and we're looking at also the way it's portrayed in the triumphant arch of Titus. Right? I'm sure you've seen it. Here is the way the menorah is portrayed on a coin. And this is in a grave.
Right. Right.
Actually, I'm sorry. Here he says that it was on the wall of a mansion, and it's described with all this ornate detail. And this is a stone.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is from a grave.
Wow.
Anyways, that, my dear friends, is today's discussion of the temple. You can imagine how beautiful it must have been.
Right.
You
It
could
was,
imagine
it
how
was.
important this must have been for King Solomon to fulfill his father's dream, to build a house for the Lord. You could imagine the joy, the excitement, the anticipation King Solomon must have felt 11 years into his reign when this was finally finished. And to know how he felt and what he did and how he celebrated, that's going to be the subject of chapter 8,
That's
which
really
I thought we'd do
interesting.
today, but we're going to actually be doing it next week, please, God.
Okay, Rabbi, I have a very important question that I have to
Go
ask.
ahead.
Okay, did you ever hear of a man called Dennis Prager?
Sure.
Okay, he's a talk show host and he's a writer.